good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Sean.
This is Alex.
And you're listening to another episode of
Coaster Kings Radio.
And today's episode is going to be kind of like a wild crossover. What does Alex call it? Kind of like a British Empire tour. I mean, we didn't go to India on this one, but we recently were both on separate work layovers. I was in Hong Kong and Alex was in the UK. And we decided to do a little episode about some of our layover adventures here. And I thought the name from Hong Kong to Hyperia was kind of cute, so here we are.
It is very cute.
So, so we were both on individual layovers alone, and we both went to parks on our own, which does happen occasionally.
Yeah.
And I really just needed to go to Ocean Park because I had missed out on Hair Razor several times now. We were in Hong Kong only a few weeks ago, and we had booked a Hong Kong hotel, like the Hong Kong Ocean Park Hotel, and everything, and then we get there and freaking Hair Razor is closed. So we never actually went into the park, even though we stayed at the hotel, because we were like, well, you know, we came here for Hair Razor, because I didn't get Hair Razor on my first visit either. So then on my third time back, which was just, you know, a couple days later, really, because we came back from China, or we came back from Hong Kong, and then just a few weeks later, or a few days later, I went back for work, and it was open, so that's the reason I went to Ocean Park.
That really worked out, because the trip ended on a sour note when we realized that Hair Razor would be closed, and that was really the only reason we needed to go to Ocean Park. We ended up leaving early and getting better seats.
We took a different flight.
We got home like half a day early, which was actually really nice, because we had a hurricane coming in Orlando, so it was actually, that worked out. And then you being able to go for work, and like, I already have the Hair Razor credit. I didn't really need to ride it again. And like, I like Ocean Park, but like, as you'll explain, your current visit, your most recent visit, was like not the greatest. It was what it was. But yeah, we'll talk about it in a little bit. Yeah. I mean, there were some highlights. I just wasn't desperate to go back. We really just needed your Hair Razor credit. Now we have that. Now we're good. We're good on the park.
Yeah. Just funny because we did have recently such a great experience at Hong Kong Disney, which we didn't do an episode about because we talked about Hong Kong Disney earlier this year, because we went to Hong Kong Disney a couple times this year. But we had such a great visit. And so we'll definitely go back to Hong Kong because the family we have there, and for Disney. But Ocean Park-wise, and we'll get into it a little bit, I think I have had my fill for now.
Yeah.
Third time at that resort is the charm for me.
Good.
Yeah,
although the hotel we stayed at, the Ocean Park Marriott,
that
night was very nice.
Very nice. Very nice resort.
Like, I would stay there,
pools.
Like, even if we were going to Hong Kong to visit and we weren't going to Ocean Park, I would still be open to staying there.
Yeah, that's fair.
Because it has like an attached metro station that's really close to like
it's the metro station for Ocean Park. Yeah, and Ocean Park really is, if you go to like Admiralty, which is kind of like the big hub station, or if you go to I guess not Admiralty, but one over. What's that station again? Central.
Central.
Yeah. Like if you go to Central, which is one station from Admiralty, which is where there's some really good hotels as well. But yeah, it's also convenient, and it's one stop from Central to Ocean Park. I mean, Ocean Park, like, it feels like you're somewhere else because you're on the backside of the mountain.
Yeah.
Of, like, Victoria Harbor, for example.
But it's very accessible.
So it feels like you're really far away, especially when you're at the park. It feels like you're out there on the ocean. But it's super convenient. I mean, Hong Kong is honestly it's a pretty convenient place because it's so tiny. Anyway.
They have the best metro, I think. I love their trains.
I love their metro. But I like the Xi'an metro, too.
Xi'an has a good metro.
There's a lot of good metro. Speaking of which, our previous episode, when you're listening to this, is the Xi'an episode, which is a city in China that's kind of, give you a quick abbreviation, is when China got unified during the Qin dynasty over 2,000 years ago. That was the headquarters. That's where the Qin guy was from. And then, of course, the Terracotta Warriors, the giant city wall, all that super ancient Chinese stuff, and a couple of really cool theme parks. We just did an episode on it, so make sure you check it out if you haven't yet. And also, wherever you're listening, whether it's Spotify, give us a 5-star review, please. Interact, ask us questions. We are on the active interaction side of the Spotify podcasting thing. And on Apple Podcasts, please also leave us a review, leave us 5 stars if you enjoy our content. Moving on to current episode, where should we start? Do we start in Asia or do we start in Europe? I feel like the people want some Europe at this point.
We can start with Europe.
Yeah,
so
Asia.
My layover, I just happened to pick up this trip. It was really convenient. I wasn't, like, planning on going to London. I wasn't, like, I had no plans or agendas, but it just worked out. And it's on a Sunday, and I was like, Thorpe Park's going to be busy, but I'm going to go. I was like, I'll probably still have a nice time. I mean, the weather was terrible. That kind of helped with crowds. But yeah, I just decided to go just to give it a shot because I remember I've been to Thorpe Park once in 2015 and I really liked it. It's not perfect. It's kind of like the quintessential Merlin park experience. Like how you feel about Merlin as a park conglomerate is kind of like distilled, and like encapsulated in the Thorpe Park experience. But I had a really nice time, and I thought the overall experience of the park, like I know Merlin's like had some rough years, and they're kind of, they have to be careful about where they spend their money, and like there's things about the parks that are, can be kind of a head scratcher, especially for like tourists like us, like people who aren't like steeped in the Great British theme park circle. Like there's just some interesting things that Merlin is doing these days in like their major theme parks that were a little surprising, but like nothing terrible. Like one of the things is like they're doing a lot of food trucks.
Interesting.
They have lots of food trucks inside the park, and it's actually, on the one hand, it's like this is kind of a weird, like very temporary. There's lots of temporary infrastructure at parks like Thorpe Park. They do, and like Alton Towers with like the what was it, the retro squad, their flat ride, like their fun fair flat rides that they were leasing to fill some of the gaps, some of the vacancies in the park. So there's just some interesting things that they're doing that I didn't really make me think one way or the other. It's like food trucks are odd, but you know what? They had lots of food options. There was lots of food. Made me wonder why there wasn't more permanent food infrastructure in the park as it stands. But I can't be mad at like having access to like good, like Indian food trucks, donut food trucks. Like there was just there was a lot of variety. There was lots of food trucks. They were most everything was open, and the lines weren't very long. And so like it served the purpose. Like it gets the job done. Anyways, so I flew into London, got in. It was still dark out when we got to London. It was a nice early flight. So I went to my hotel, checked in, and then took the train out almost all the way back to Heathrow. I took a cab then from, not Heathrow, but the station just before Heathrow, if you're coming from London on the tube. I forget the name of the station. And the reason for that, it's technically a longer drive to Thorpe Park, but because the airport will charge an exit fee for taxis and lifts and stuff, it was actually cheaper to get off the tube earlier and take a longer taxi ride than it would have been to be physically closer to the park and exit out of Heathrow and have them tack on like an extra $10 or $15 dollars to my fare. I ended up showing up at the park like right before open. There was huge lines to get in, but everything moved fairly orderly. It was super wet and slushy and windy, and there was no guarantees that like Hyperia would be open. Like I didn't know what was going to be open, but I didn't care. I was just happy to be there. I was getting paid. Like,
it almost didn't open.
Yeah, Hyperia. Yeah, Hyperia was a saga, but it did open. Spoiler alert! I wrote it. The only roller coaster that appeared to even be operating when I got there, like while we were waiting outside, they send everyone through this huge winding switchback as they're sending everyone into the park, which actually I think is kind of a cool system. Like, you really get into the park based on when you show up at the gates is when you get into the park. It's not like a bunch of turnstiles with individual lines and like some move faster than others. Everyone gets funneled into one single line to get into Thorpe Park, and it's like a huge series of switchbacks, but I knew that like I was still getting into the park earlier than anybody else that was behind me in line. Like, so if that's the sort of thing that matters to you, that's kind of a nice way of doing it. I went to Swarm because that was the only thing that I actually physically saw open. The app had rides that were listed as open, but I didn't actually see anything running. Like Stealth claimed to be running, but I didn't actually see it dispatched, so I was like, I'm not going to go there. So I went to Swarm first and got on very quickly, which was great because later it had like a 2-hour wait. Yeah. The lines did get really crazy at the park, and there was some tedium in the waiting, but my first few rides I got really lucky with just being there at the front end of the operating day. So I rode Swarm. That's a great ride. You, Sean, are like the ultimate wing coaster cheerleader.
I know, and I'm missing a couple wing coasters, including Swarm, including the Mandrill Mayhem, of course, is new.
Yeah, we're missing most of the European ones, honestly.
Yeah, but we have a UK trip planned, so hopefully we can knock out the UK ones for me in May, and then eventually the Italian one,
Yeah.
and the German one should be doable at some point too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, Swarm's a great ride. I don't know if it'll really, for someone who's ridden as many wing coasters as you have, I don't know if it's gonna like
Wow, me.
really tip the scales. For me, I still really like it, and I liked it as well as I did in 2015. And when I rode it in 2015, it was brand new, and it was.
But I've never
neat.
not liked
It was a
the
neat
wing
ride,
coaster.
yeah.
So for me, it's all about just kind of like the overall
Yeah.
vibe of a ride. It doesn't have to be the best wing coaster. I don't think I go into rides expecting them to be the best.
Yeah.
I mean, what's the most recent new wing that we've ridden?
The Forest Predator. One
Forest
is the
Predator,
newest
that
one.
was good, and
Yeah.
then the one in Chongqing was very good.
Yeah.
And then, but Parrot Coaster, which we rode really early on in the game, we rode Parrot Coaster. God, what is it, like 5.5 years ago already?
Yeah, like 6 years ago.
And then Parrot Coaster was obviously like,
Yeah.
it's still kind of my fave. So I don't really care for a new coaster my favorite as long as it's fun. That's all I really care
Yeah,
about.
I guess So I think you'll like it. And the aesthetic is different. It's neat. It's very Merlin. It's it's the apocalypse, alien invasion. The train, like the station is in this like abandoned church with the roof torn off. Like this ride cracks me up. Like it is the most dark, foreboding, and that's just like a classic Merlin thing. Everything is intense. Everything's grungy and extreme, and like the whole vibe of the ride, where like everybody's fleeing to the church to hide like from this alien invasion, and then the ride is you getting plucked away and whisked away into the air by these aliens that like ostensibly like pluck everyone off. So it's like a very dark premise, but it's a cool ride. It's got some neat gags.
And then you say it's kind of on its own island. I've actually not been to Thorpe, guys.
It's
So
totally on its own little.
Believe it or not.
It's very compartmentalized. So it's got its own little area with its own little vibe. There's effects on the ride that are still working, which I think is great. There's a wing dip moment where like the water fountains pop out, and I'd actually forgotten that was there, and that was the side of the train I was on. And then we came through the water and did like the dip, and the water came up, and I was like, oh great, that's a cool little thing, a little flourish that there's still. But yeah, great ride. I guess one of the nice things about doing apocalypse themes is that you build it once, you don't really have to maintain all
it could
of it.
decay, and it's kind of fun.
In a way, it even makes more sense thematically than it did, because when I first wrote it, it was still quite new, and there were things that just seemed very fresh about it. And now, things like the billboard that you blast through, like it's tattered and worn, and it feels a bit more like weathered. Like it really, the theme definitely works there. So anyway, I finished Swarm. A lot of other people did go to Swarm after I did, because by the time I was finished writing, it was like the line was over an hour. Because like Hyperia wasn't open yet, Saw wasn't open yet. I didn't even ride Colossus. That was like kind of on my lowest priority, and I ended up just like focusing on other stuff and not really having enough time to bother with it. But that was fine, because I really, my priorities were where they were.
Yeah.
Then I went to Stealth, because that one I saw it test once. And it wasn't open yet, but then I was like, let me go over there, because if I catch it right when it opens, like I'll be really glad. And I did. I was just kind of wandering around over there, and it was testing, and I waited patiently for the staff member to open the gate, and he did, and I walked right on. And then I took just whatever open seat was there. I sat like in the very back, and then I got right around and got back in line again and waited only like 15 minutes, because once the ride was open and everybody knew, it started to get really busy. But I was like, well, let me get a couple rides on this, because I think for a lot of people, it's still easily like Thorpe's best coaster. It's very thrilling. The hydraulic launches are always satisfying. Reminds me a lot. It's like a perfect cross between like Accelerator and King Ka, rest in peace. But the way that it like takes off right out of the station, it's just like a very satisfying overall experience. Great ride. I'm glad that it seems to be as reliable and efficient and consistent as it is with Thorpe, because I think for every intimate accelerator coaster that's been built that runs consistently, there's one that has been retired or does not run consistently or is in the middle of being completely overhauled due to an incident or something. And so as far as I know, Stealth has really not given them too many issues. So great ride, great experience. After my 2 rides on Stealth, by that point the park was, big open. It had been open for like an hour. I got 3 rides in without having to wait, and then that was going to be it for me as far as riding stuff without waits, because everything by that point was between like an hour or 2 hours. Hyperia was long away from opening because of the winds, the high winds. They said that the staff were amazing, you guys. The staff at Thorpe Park, I think, are really, really friendly.
I love to hear that, actually, because, I mean, not like have any sort of opinion on it in advance, but it's kind of nice to hear that that's like a highlight of a day.
You just never know. Even the best parks can have staff interactions that kind of drag the experience down, and then even some of the worst parks can have, great staff experiences that will that kind of boost the overall vibe. And Thorpe was definitely a park that I felt like, whether I was buying food or talking to a staff member in front of Hyperia or talking to someone in a gift shop, like the staff were really friendly and seemed to be enjoying their jobs and enjoying talking to people. So I hung out in front of Hyperia for a little bit just because it was a very relaxed day. It was a very chill day. I was happy with the 3 rides that I'd gotten already. I was like, my next options were to wait an hour for Nemesis Inferno or an hour for Saw or an hour for Colossus. Saw has a single rider line, so after hanging out in front of Hyperia for a bit and regrouping, I decided to roll the dice with Saw's single rider line. Saw broke down in the middle of my wait time. That ended up being the most time-consuming part of my day, was riding Saw, and it was still a shorter line than it would have been. I'm pretty sure the single rider line still saved me a good half hour. And it's one of those things where people will get into the single rider line if they're part of a big group to save themselves some time. For me, because I was a single rider, and because I feel like on old Eurofighters every seat is kind of the same.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have a rough experience no matter where
everyone's
I sit.
a single rider on.
So I was I really don't care where I sit. So let me just do the single rider line, and even if I break even, then oh well. I didn't have much to lose. I was actually secretly hoping for a back row ride, because even though the views are better in the front, the back row is usually smoother on Eurofighters. Although I wouldn't have known based on my ride, because once I finally got on, oh my god, this ride. So, Sean and I love a good rough coaster. We love rides like Goodric's. We love rides like Vortex at Kings Island and Viper at Magic Mountain. We do not turn our noses up at a rough ride experience. I can take a hit. If I get punched in the jaw by an over-the-shoulder restraint, that's not a deal breaker for me. But, when it comes to tracking and, getting pummeled in, the lower back area because of the way that a ride is tracking, then for me, we have a problem. I don't mind upper body blows at all, but lower body stuff is when I start to have a bad time. And Saw at Thorpe Park is a bad time, you guys. First half of the ride's great. The indoor part, everything, it's right up until the first drop, it's bad. You feel every piece of track, every transition is you just thud right along. You bump right along. You keep just
it sounds like my worst nightmare. It reminds me of the one at the American Dream.
It was actually, so when we rode Shellraiser, it was bad. We rode it twice, right? Just to make sure that we
rode it more than twice. Actually. We rode it a couple times. Shellraiser
was a pretty bad experience. I would wager to say that my ride on Saw might have actually even been worse.
That's crazy.
And that's a pity, because in 2015 it was my favorite ride there. I really liked it a lot, because in 2015, it's rough. That was a punch in the jaw kind of experience. But I don't remember it tracking super badly. I just remember it being violent and fast, but still kind of smooth. Now it's oh my god, just the whole way through. And by the time it was over, I was so relieved. I was oh my back.
I mean, it's kind of torture themed, right?
I know, it's so on brand. And on the one hand, it's God, it was not a pleasant experience. That was, there's not, a roller coaster has to be really bad for me to be no, I don't want to ride that again. But even if there was no line, I probably wouldn't have ridden it again, because the whole outdoor experience on the ride was really unpleasant. But yeah, very on brand for the theme. And God, it had the longest line in the park. People loved that ride. And the staff, to their credit, they were pumping those trains out. I mean, they were running 8 trains on it. It's not even that big of a ride. And it was just constant. There was constantly vehicles going. There wasn't a moment where there wasn't 2 vehicles in the outdoor portion of the ride, minimum. So people really like that ride, and people will wait 2 hours easy for that ride. But God, like it was just bad. Like when we go together, I'll ride it again with you, just so that I can enjoy your torture experience with it. I want to be there for you when you're.
I don't even think I'm that big of
in agony.
I don't know if I'm that big of a Eurofighter fan to begin with. I'm trying to think of any Eurofighters that I really care about.
Floats will not go around.
Floats will not go maybe the only one.
That's kind of like the exception to the rule.
And I like Mystery Mine and
Mystery Mine's good.
But even Mystery Mine has its moments.
And like the Infinity coasters are better. This ride just feels very evident of an old Gerstlauer.
I can feel Gerstlauer's on HUL period.
But then, yeah, Gerstlauers in general are just kind of a mixed bag. Like, I feel like for every good Gerstlauer, like, for every good, like, Eurofighter, like, so by all accounts, like, the Smiler apparently is flawless. Like, I hear nothing but positive things about Smiler.
I look forward to riding that.
But then it's like, I couldn't imagine my ride on Saw being any more unpleasant. So it's like, I don't know. I don't know what the future holds for that ride, because I also feel like from a maintenance perspective, like no ride that feels like that to the rider can be like operating healthily in terms of like a maintenance perspective. But yeah, so after that, I took a little break because I was sore, and I was like, let me just walk around a bit. I got a sandwich. I got the only things that I ate at the park were little sandwiches. I got 2 hot sandwiches, one right at the beginning of the day, in like the main indoor portion of the park, right at the entrance, and then I got another one near the Darren Brown Ghost Train exit. The Ghost Train Dark Ride's not open right now. I don't really know what's going on with that ride. It was actually, the attraction was being built on my first Thorpe visit, and now on this visit, it's like it's already been like they've already kind of redone it like 1 or 2 times, and now it's closed. And I feel like I've never heard anything good about the ride. I've just heard that it was like a really ambitious concept that was like a difficult to execute concept, but like the Thorpe just struggled with like executing it, maintaining it, like the whole bit. So I hope they open it at some point, and that it's the next iteration of the ride, if they're redoing it or whatever. I hope that it's a pleasant experience, because I kind of forget it exists, but it is a dark ride. Like it's a true like 4D dark ride type thing concept. I still really don't know what it does, but it's like right in the middle of the park, and it has a lot of infrastructure. It's got a nice presence to it. So hopefully they get it sorted out. Hopefully they open it. My next area of focus was Nemesis Inferno, and I had a nice time, even though I waited like an hour, and that was fine. Actually, I probably waited more, because I ended up waiting for the front, and I'm glad I did, because that's a great front seat ride. The queue like weaves around underneath the ride, so it was like a really fun experience, like just waiting in line. Like I didn't mind that at all. I took lots of little videos. I made a reel of little clips of it doing the double interlocking corkscrew. It was a fun ride to just admire. And then riding it, oh my god, it is so much better than I remember. I remember liking it a lot in 2015, but it obviously like suffered by comparison to Nemesis at Alton Towers, which I rode the same trip.
So didn't you say you liked it better this time than Nemesis? No, maybe that's a big claim. But I thought you kind of
I really liked Nemesis a lot, but I was really blown away by Nemesis Inferno. Like, it was so good that I really, for a minute, I contemplated standing in line another 90 minutes again, just to ride it like in the front again, because it was so good. It reminds me of how like Silver Bullet at Knott's Berry Farm, always underestimated. Like since the day it opened, rides like Nemesis Inferno and Silver Bullet have suffered from comparison. People would complain that they're too gentle, too slow, too this, like not as good as Batman, not as good as Nemesis at Alton Towers, whatever. But like, we love Silver Bullet, and I think Silver Bullet has really come into its own in the last 20 years. And but as far as I'm concerned, offers like a premium inverted coaster experience, and that's, I think, where Nemesis Inferno is as well. It was just running so fast, rapid fire moments. When I rode it in 2015, I remember feeling like it was kind of short, but this time when I rode it, the length didn't bother me. It didn't feel like an overly short, like it felt like just the right, because it was so intense. It was such an aggressive ride experience this time that when it was over, I was really ready to catch my breath. I was like, wow, like that was ferocious. Like, it just tore it up.
I will say in general, I mean, I don't think there's a bad B&M invert out there. And the tiny ones that are so compact and stuff, I think, I'm trying to think, I have a hard time thinking of even a single one I don't love, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you. And then it's just like, this one just really, it went from being a ride that I've ridden to a ride that I am like passionate about because of the way it was. And it makes, I mean, again, it was running 2 trains. The trains they were firing them out like rapid fire. So like the track was hot, it was wet, trains were full, constant operations. So like they were just like running, it was just running at like top condition, like ideal circumstances. For like a great ride, and it was excellent. It was awesome. I just can't say enough good things about Nemesis Inferno. Cannot wait to ride that again with you on our visit next year. And then so by this point, I had ridden everything that I really needed to ride that was open. Colossus had like over an hour wait. I didn't feel like dealing with it because I think it had like a 1 train operation. No, it just seemed like unnecessarily tedious. So I just kind of hung out around Hyperia, and over the course of the next 3 hours, Hyperia slowly awoke. Like, they took trains out of the maintenance barn, added the water dummies, they tested a lot. Very thorough testing. I think they've had a few incidents where it saddled. So they're just like really, really trying to avoid that happening on windy days. But yeah, there finally, in like at the bitter end, but it was dark out. The ride finally opened. Seemed like everyone in the park was there waiting for the ride, but because I was just kind of hanging out, kind of very casually, I was toward the front of the line. Just because I was very content with my day, and I was like, I just need to ride this. Like, I just want to be here when it opens, and if it doesn't open, like, you know, oh well. But it did open. I was on like the 3rd or 4th train out of the night, and the ride, I mean, the park was only open for another 45 minutes after the ride finally opened. Like, they really did a great thing getting it open, and then it was inevitable that it would take hours to go through all the people that had gotten in line. So like the staff were definitely rock stars here after spending all day explaining to people about the ride and like when it would open, and then finally the ride opens, and then they have to work like until like 2 hours after the park is closed to work through all the crowds. So good on them, good on the park. I'm glad it's the park, I think, is just a very persistent operator. Even though the park is busy, I feel like they do their best in most cases with the crowds. The Hyperia area has gotten complaints because it seems a little cheap. Like, some of the structures and stuff just seem very, I don't know how you'd say it. The buildings are all very boxy. They almost look like trailers, some of the buildings and stuff. Nothing seems overly permanent or substantial in the area. It definitely feels like they built the coaster, and that's all the money they had was to build the coaster. And there was absolutely no money left for things like landscaping or for nice buildings for the structures. Like, it's all very minimalist, I guess you would say. But that's fine. You know, it's whatever. It's fine. They got a good coaster. Hyperia is a good ride. I've only read it once, but I really liked it a lot. I was in row 3, and yeah, I really enjoyed it. It's not a super long coaster, but it's just long enough to feel like it doesn't feel like it is missing anything. It's 6 drops, including the lift hill. Like, it's 6 big, like, it has 6 elements. It does 6 things, but it does those 6 things very well. First drop is cool. It doesn't actually feel that different from, like, this is gonna sound bad, but like the first drop reminded me of like a slightly exaggerated version of a Skyrocket 2. Where you do that,
yeah.
You do the nosedive into a perfect 180 twist, and then
funny because I heard only
it.
Amazing things about the first drop.
And that's a good ride. It's a good drop. My favorite thing about the ride, the aspect of the ride that really left its impression on me was just the scope of it. I love it because it's big. I love just the sheer size of it. The way that other rides in the park, the way the train, the standard 6-vehicle train, just feels dwarfed by the shape and the size of the inversions. I love the hang time in the elements. Just The hanging loop kind of toward the end of the ride, the last of like the big elements before it hits the water trims. You just feel like you hang in that forever. It's a great sensation. Mac Rides does that really well. The ride, living in my mind rent-free, is Flash at Leeway Adventure, which is one of Mac's few other hypercoasters. I wouldn't say that I liked Hyperia better than Flash, just based on my one ride compared to our 3 rides on Flash. But they're very different, and I think they accomplished something really unique with Hyperia. I appreciate that they didn't concern themselves with really any convention when it came to designing this hypercoaster. They really just did something completely unconventional. No concern for expectations or like.
It's kind of refreshing, isn't it?
It really is.
Because I feel like in a way when I see all these new coasters come to market, sometimes I'm like, oh my god, it's just the same thing over and over and over.
Yeah.
Even if it's kind of new and kind of different and the elements are a different lineup, or I don't know, I'm not always excited. But Hyperion, it has a completely different look to it. Of course, I haven't ridden it yet, but a completely different look to it. I feel like almost every single thing it does is different. Does it forcefully run out of speed too early because of that trim brake, because of the space restraints? Yeah, but everything that it does do, it does look like it hasn't really quite been done before. And sometimes less is more, I think.
Yeah, that's what I mean about like the 6 elements. It only does 6 things, but it does it. Those 6 things are great. 6 great moments on a ride. No fluff, no helixes of nothing, no endless gut-busting bunny hops and stuff. It's just everything. The ride is extremely purposeful. And when you're building an expensive roller coaster that's like 250 feet tall, like everything needs to count. Or you're throwing away money. You're throwing away millions of dollars if you're building a roller coaster and not every element that it does feels like it adds to the greater overall picture. And every moment just slaps. That one element that everybody talks about that is like the outside thing that like turns into a roll, and like that's a very cool moment. That doesn't feel like anything else that I've ridden. I've never felt quite so reliant on a lap bar on a ride before, except for maybe it's like right up there with the Mauer sky loops, like hanging in your restraint as you crest the lift upside down on like Abismo in Madrid. It kind of had that feel, except it was way more comfortable. But yeah, I would say that by all accounts, Hyperia is a great success and a really neat ride. And it maybe, I think for people, it's not gonna. If you have expectations, if you're going into this and you wanted something like Expedition G-Force or something like lots of bunny hops and airtime hills, if you were looking for something like Steel Vengeance, like yeah, it's not gonna be what you hoped for. But if you go into the ride and take it for what it is and take it for how unique it is, there's just nothing like it. Like there's really like. I can't think of another coaster that even remotely really feels like this ride, because the scope of it is rare. There's not a lot of substantial, like there's not a lot of great coasters. There's not a lot of coasters in general that like exceed that 250 or 240. Like,
right? Isn't Europe? The UK's tallest coaster. No,
yeah,
it's like Europe.
And
yeah.
It's and then you compare it to something like Red Force, and I'm like, well, this is way better than Red Force. This just does so much more.
Speaking of which,
like Red Force.
Rest in peace, King the Cobb. We love you forever.
King Cobb forever. Long live the king. But yeah, so I got my ride on Hyperia. It was such an electric experience, like being surrounded by all the people, the friends that I made waiting in line. Like it was a very triumphant and like exuberant
social butterfly
moment. It felt great. It was, everyone was so tickled. I mean, I opened my mouth. They know that I'm not from there. So they're like, well, so they're like, so what brings you here? And I'm like, well, this brought me here. And they're like, you came to Europe to ride this coaster. I was like, well, I'm here for work. And I was like, I'm going to go to Thorpe Park. I'm here. I have a day off in London. Like, I'm going to go to the theme park. And I was like, if it opens, great. If not, like, I'm going to come back anyway. But it was really exciting that it did open and that it worked out. And the park worked tirelessly to make that happen for the people in the park that day. Overall, it was a lot of waiting. The day was full of waiting around, waiting for Hyperia to open, waiting for Saw, waiting for Nemesis Inferno. I got like 7 rides in total, but I was content with that. I had really no complaints. So once I rode Hyperia, the park was still open for another like 45 minutes, but I definitely was ready to go back to my hotel. It was easy and cheap to get a car because
it wasn't quite closing.
The park wasn't ready, wasn't closing yet for the day. So I made my departure, and that was that.
I kind of love leaving before park closure in some instances nowadays, because I always just kind of love getting out before everyone else gets out.
Yeah, when it's a taxi experience, a taxi situation, I love leaving the park early. Get in early, be as efficient as possible, get out early.
And then we'll move from Hyperia to Hong Kong, just because we're already 35 minutes in.
Now we're going to Asian.
My thing won't take us long. But anyway, so showed up in Hong Kong, went to bed because I was tired and it was a long flight. And then woke up and got up really early and went for breakfast with some family.
Yes, my cousin, Caitlin.
Dave,
her husband Dave, and their daughter
Charlene. And we went to Bakehouse. If you're ever in Hong Kong, Bakehouse is like this famous, I guess, like bakehouse.
Yeah, it's a bakehouse.
And they have a really good breakfast, and they've got really good lunch items, and pastries, of course. And so I had this little, the custard egg tarts that are really popular in Hong Kong. I got one of those that was like super fresh, hella good, hella warm. And then had avocado toast, because why not? And was full of Parmesan shavings. It was actually quite good. And then afterwards went to a tea house, had some tea, and then I separated myself from the equation and I went to Ocean Park. When I got there, it was actually quite busy because it was a Saturday and it was Halloween season. So I bought from the line passes, which really only served me well for like one ride, and that was the Sky Ride. But to get to the other side of the park, so Hong Kong is located on a mountain, and the back side of the mountain is over the ocean, which is where the majority of the park is located. And then you have the front side that they call the waterfront, but you really can't see the water from it. Yeah. And that part is where they have like old Hong Kong, and then they have the Sky Ride that goes over the mountain, or you can take the funicular through the mountain to get to the other side where all the exciting things are. And so I took the Sky Ride, and the Sky Ride has 2 sides, 4 cables, or 4 patterns of movement total, which is kind of iconic, with these small little buckets hanging from it. The circular, they're not air conditioned, so you will sweat titties in there because it is Hong Kong and it is hot. But anyway, so the line for it was like a good 45 minutes. Like there was a lot of people waiting to go to the Thrill Mountain side of the park, is what they call it, Thrill Mountain. And so at least I bought the front of the line pass for all the rides, and that just got me on the Sky Ride quick, because at this point I had to get all the stuff in for the day, and I had to go back and nap and then fly back to the States. So it was just a lot going on.
You didn't ride the Sky Ride last time.
And last time the Sky Ride was down.
It was down. Yeah. They have a funicular too that'll bring you up, which is a cool little ride in its own right, but not as special as the Sky Ride. So the Sky Ride was more unfinished business for you as well.
And the Sky Ride just gives amazing views, because you are on this beautiful blue water, like on the lagoon, and on the backside of kind of like, is it Hong Kong Island you're fishing on? Yeah. And so it's just very, very pretty. And
when they say Ocean Park, they mean Ocean Park.
Yeah, like everything is surrounded by ocean. The whole thing just sticks into the ocean. And so as your journey progresses, which it is a very steep mountain, it's a long cable car ride all the way to the other side of the mountain. You just are overlooking the South Chinese Sea. It's just gorgeous. So that's actually was one of the highlights of the day, because you can't mess up a scenic Sky Ride. I mean,
one of the best in the world.
One of the best in the world. And so the goal, of course, was to get my hair razor, which did appear to be running as I was on the Sky Ride. And actually, funny enough, it was running 2 trains, because it was a busy Saturday because of Halloween, but there was actually no real line for it. So the first time I rode using the front of the line pass, and I got front row, but I didn't really need to wait because the actual queue was like a 1 train wait. But at least I got front row, and then I went back around and got on again and rode the back row. And I will say, while Hair Razor is a spectacularly located coaster on top of the mountain overlooking the ocean, it is a rough B&M floorless coaster. It is just, oh my god, I couldn't believe how rough it was. And we had a full train, so it wasn't like empty train syndrome. It was just shaking. And at one point, my vision was blurred for most of the ride, which kind of ruined the views. And then when I rode in the back, it was a little bit better. It was a little less hammery. But it was still, I don't think it tracks well at all. And for this to be the only remaining major roller coaster at this park is very sad. Because in 2022, they officially retired Dragon and the Mine Train, as well as the Log Flume. And those 3 iconic rides are now just sitting there abandoned. And now, if you want like a thrill, like a big roller coaster, the only thing you have left is Hair Raiser, and I just don't think it's all that. I mean, it looks cool, and I get why you would keep your new B&M alive over your old your old Aero Looper or your Zamperla Mine Train, but really, I think Dragon should still be with us. Dragon is located amidst all the attractions that are still open, and it, in my opinion, is a much better coaster with way better views. Anyway, so rode Hair Raiser a couple times, and then went through the Arctic exhibit they have there. I skipped the powered coaster because we did it last time.
Yeah.
And then I'm usually not a big water ride person, but since I brought the From the Line Pass and I really felt like I had to use it because I didn't get much use out of it, I decided to ride the Rapids ride and use it for that. Which the Rapids ride's cute. It's nothing super spectacular, but it has a couple aviaries around the ride. It has some waterfalls. It's a pretty decent ride. I can't complain. I mean, and again, I'm not the biggest fan of rapid rides unless they're very well done. This one was pretty okay. Nothing too noticeable. I didn't get wet, so that's the biggest thing that
that's
matters.
All that matters.
Yeah.
No harm, no foul.
No harm, no foul. And then I went and I rode the Sky Tower because you get the best views. I will say, thank God that thing is still open because you get the best views of the park.
Yeah.
And so, and the surrounding ocean, it was just so gorgeous. But at the same time, it was kind of sad because you see all of the park that's closed. For Halloween, right now, they have a maze where the drop towers are, so that looks pretty abandoned. Of course, Dragon is sitting there among the rides, abandoned.
It's so sad that Dragon is abandoned when it's still, like, dead center.
Yeah, of all
surrounded by operating attractions. It just doesn't seem...
It doesn't make any sense.
Like it was necessary for it to be closed.
And then they have a big like walrus area that is under construction right now, so I couldn't go over there. But then when you stare down a mountain, you see the old Zamperla mine train and the log flume, and that's all abandoned. And it's just really sad because so much of what the park was is just now overgrown and nasty, and it's just, I mean, it hasn't been touched. I mean, things are just falling, roofs are falling apart. It's just, I mean, it's very tragic, and the weird thing is it lines up right with the new Waterworld complex, which Waterworld is a absolutely spectacular new water park concept. It's like a multi-level water park on the side of the mountain, ultra modern, lots of slides, indoor, outdoor, infinity pools. I mean, you can't make it up, and it's all there at a Waterworld, which is a really cool water park. But then I don't know what this resort does to operate or what decisions they're making, because sure enough, we were at Waterworld, looking at Waterworld, and it's a Saturday, it's Halloween season, it's hot out, and you know, it's still very hot in like mid-October in Hong Kong, and Waterworld isn't open for the day. And I'm like, well, what other day are you going to open? It's a Saturday. The park is...
Hong Kong has water park
the park
weather
is kind of busy,
round.
and now you're not going to open your brand new amazing water park that's supposed to save you from failure. I mean, it's not open, so that made no sense to me. Anyway, so then eventually after riding the Sky Ride and enjoying all the views, I wandered down to where the shark exhibit is. And so that's actually one of my favorite shark exhibits in the world. Alex remembers riding it with
Yes,
me.
the goblin shark is still haunting my nightmares to this day.
The goblin shark. Yeah, so gorgeous exhibit. And it's you kind of make your way down the exhibit in like a helix fashion.
Yeah, it's like 3 loops, right?
Yeah, and
at the end there's the anti-finning.
Yeah, like the anti-finning, or like the against the fin soup and stuff.
Finished with fins.
Finished with fins, and it's still all there. So that's a really fun exhibit. I did that, and then had a quick potato on a stick snack because I was starving, and then wandered around Dragon for a while because I'll be honest with you, like the parts of the park where you could really enjoy the view were the parts of the park that are now closed. There used to be a giant walkway that went past the Dolphin Breeding Center all the way down to the backside of the mountain, and there you would go down the escalators.
Oh, yeah, that used to be a service road. And
yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then you would go down the escalators to where the mine train was and the log flume. But now that whole walkway is closed, so you can't really enjoy the view that well, except for when you're over by Dragon. And you can still walk all around Dragon and the station and around the ride because the ride sits over a midway. And you still can get the best views from there. It's just very tragic because Dragon is big closed. So now you just stare at all these abandoned coaster tracks from what was once your favorite or second favorite aero coaster, which is very sad. I mean, it's incredibly overgrown. So there's a couple photos out there on our Facebook page. If you scroll back or search for Hong Kong Ocean Park, you will see or Dragon, you will see our photos of there. They've posted pretty well. It's also on our Instagram. You can find it there as well. And when this podcast comes out, I'll try to post a couple more photos of it along with some other photos of Ocean Park for the episode. But you'll kind of see how the ride's just sitting there. The station is covered up by a couple planters, and it almost feels like they could just operate it if they wanted to at some point. I mean, the train's missing, but they could put that back on the track.
My God, what if they got the MK-1212s for it?
Oh my God, I would die.
I would literally cry.
I just don't know what the park is trying to do. I cannot predict what they're trying to do. But walking around it was very sad because the majority of tracks are now just covered in plants and vegetation. I mean, 2 years in the lush jungles of Hong Kong isn't a lot. It's enough time to cover your ride.
Nature takes it back quick.
It happens very quick. And when you go to the swinging ship, which is kind of in the middle of the ride, and that's still open, and you're just walking by and you see all this abandoned, obviously the abandonment of the ride. It's sad. And then when you walk around the park, Dragon is such an icon. It's been positioned in such a strategic way historically that it's just kind of present wherever you are, and unfortunately it's very dead. So that's very, very much a downside of the park right now because I loved our first visit when everything was open and the park felt more alive, and now the park really just feels kind of dead in a way that it's hard to describe because even when it's busy, it doesn't feel like the park is doing that well. It doesn't feel healthy.
It doesn't feel like a park
the
that's
attendance
thriving.
doesn't lie, but man, it's just really rough around the edges. Rougher than a lot of mainland Chinese parks right now, which is surprising.
It's really saying something.
Because mainland Chinese parks are often just not maintained. And that's sad to see for a park that once was top 5 Asian attended theme parks for a long time. I mean, they used to have a killer whale. Like, it used to be a really prominent park.
I mean, they were the first, and I think the only Asian park still to this day that has won the Leesburg Applause Award.
Yeah.
And
like the setting is so impressive and it's so scenic and it's so cool. And if it was just like a place to go hiking, I mean, I would pay to hike there. Like, it's so spectacular. The views you can't beat. But man, if you're just walking around these attractions that feel like they're just not well maintained, and it's a sprawling, massive park. So when stuff is not open or it's not maintained, it just feels very noticeable.
It has so much potential.
Well, so much potential.
It's potential to be a massive park, and if they ran it in such a way and could market it in such a way and get people in.
And they added the hotel and they added the big modern ass water park. Like, they're adding stuff, but it just doesn't feel like they're thriving or doing that well. I'm just concerned for their future. I mean, I'm sure that's already subsidized. Who knows what the future holds for that? But I feel like they'd be better off just keeping it looking good. Maybe like at least renovate whatever's there and then maybe reopening Dragon. Because for a little bit in 2021, I believe it was, or 2020, they were announcing that they were going to move to a vendor-based operation where like you would get admission for very, very cheap and then you would buy your rides. So you would buy admission to Dragon, you would buy admission to their log flume. And then sometime between that and 2022, they decided that wasn't going to work. Or maybe they couldn't get vendors interested in operating these attractions. And then they just moved to closing the rides that were probably hemorrhaging money. And that's what we're left with. But it's just kind of sad to see that. And I think ever since Chamlong Ocean Kingdom opened in 2014, just across the border in Zhuhai, I mean, like when I say that Zhuhai, Macau, and Hong Kong are like practically one, I mean, you can take a metro to Macau and the mainland. I mean, you can take a metro to the mainland, take a boat to Macau. There's a bridge connecting Zhuhai, Macau, and Hong Kong. I mean, it's all pretty much one now, even though it's, Hong Kong is still kind of separate from all that. And Macau is also a special administrative region. The masses that are going to an amusement park that is themed to the ocean, they're all going to Ocean Kingdom now. It's a much superior theme park. The aquariums make everything at Ocean Park seem weak, and now they have that second theme park. I mean, it's the second or third most attended resort in Asia
it's a
or China.
spectacular theme park resort.
And so I feel like Ocean Park is hurting because of that, because of the proximity. Ocean Park is the old park. It's the park that doesn't have the flashy big whale shark aquarium, doesn't have the flashy big roller coasters, doesn't have the beluga shows and the killer whale aquarium. Like, it doesn't have any of that. And it's very painfully noticeable that Ocean Park is struggling. So that's kind of the sad part of it all. I don't know when I need to go back because I still spend a lot of money going there. They're not cheap.
Yeah.
And also the average person in Hong Kong doesn't make that much money. Like, I hate to say it, but the disappropriate cost of stuff like housing and like entertainment compared to income is pretty wild to me sometimes, and this is no exception. I mean, I spend a lot of cash. I don't have the exact number, but we travel around Asia a lot, and I feel like one of my more expensive theme park days in the last year, where we went to a lot of theme parks all over Asia and China, was definitely Ocean Park. I spent a lot on the front of the line pass. I spent a lot on admission. It just was kind of, I don't know. Like, I wanted to be successful, but it doesn't feel like they're doing so hot still. And that we felt that way 6.5 years ago, too.
I think, it seems like their attendance is getting a little better. I hope that their situation is stabilizing. You know what's funny is, their Halloween event is big business.
Yeah,
they kind of they take in their proximity, in their context with Disneyland, and Disneyland is always like the not so scary, like kid friendly thing. Hong Kong Disneyland has that market locked up, and it's very successful. Their Halloween stuff is very, very popular. Ocean Park has kind of taken the role of the Universal Studios, Knott's Scary Farm kind of thing. They do a very scary, like very horror forward, late teens, early 20s kind of thing. And that definitely, they've got even though they compete directly with Hong Kong Disneyland, when it comes to Halloween events, they are running unopposed. And they offer, as far as I've heard, they offer a great product for that sort of thing. When we got home from the trip, I was getting targeted ads on YouTube
for Hong Kong,
for Ocean Park's Halloween event, specifically for the Halloween event. Really high budget looking commercials, advertising this stuff. So there's money there. Money's being made, attendance is happening, and money is being spent. I just really hope that it's stable and that the park can pull through this like very awkward phase of kind of reimagining itself and trying to exist in the context not only of Disneyland but of Chai Long Ocean Kingdom.
Yeah, maybe if they were to take that lower lot area where the log flume and the mine train were and completely redo it, maybe even along the style of Waterworld, or maybe even make a second entrance down there. There's hope. I mean, there's, like Alex said, a lot of potential, but it doesn't feel very healthy right now. That's, I think, the problem.
It seems like because they did the water park, and that was a huge investment that is also, by all accounts, very successful. I think the proximity of the water park to the area of the theme park that is now closed, I hope they have a plan to, like, kind of bridge it all together again, because right now it feels very compartmentalized.
I mean, you would know that Waterworld existed if you weren't on the Sky Ride.
Yeah,
I mean, on the
tower,
on the tower, because Waterworld is really tucked away in like the bottom corner and the back side of the park. I mean, even to get to Waterworld from the actual main entrance of the park, you have to go all the way around the mountain by bus.
And it's just wild because, like, back in the day,
I don't know why they put it there.
Well, that entrance,
it's cool.
That where the water park is used to be an entrance to the park, and it was like the park had two entrances, and you would enter from one side or the other, and that's why the log flume was there. That's why that log flume is old. It's from the 70s.
Yeah,
and the log flume, and they had the escalators up, and at the time it just made sense. It worked in its own little way.
Didn't it used to be the biggest escalator system in the world when it opened?
It was the largest outdoor escalator system
that's pretty crazy.
Ever built until Universal Studios Hollywood built their escalator network to connect the upper and lower lots. But yeah, like when you look, I love looking at old pictures of Ocean Park because there was a vision. Like, it made it in its own way. It made sense. It had the two halves of the park that they connected via the Sky Ride. The Sky Ride itself was like a huge component of the experience. Like, that was what you were doing when you went to Ocean Park, was like riding the Sky Ride, seeing the exhibits, the pandas, obviously. And so, like, if you entered in the back entrance, you would have the log flume and the Enterprise were like kind of what festooned that side of it. And then there wasn't really much over there other than just the escalators that would then take you to the top where the Sky Ride is.
Yeah.
And those animal exhibits. And then that bridged nicely into the section of the park that they added in the 80s with all the Huss aero rides, including Dragon. And then that connected to the plaza with the Sky Ride. And so, like, in a way, like, it all did work. There was a time where the park's layout, like, actually did make sense. I think when it started getting weird was when they opened up that service road into a midway to, like, increase access to, like, the mine train coaster and stuff, like, to bridge things around so there wasn't quite so many, like, little dead ends and things.
I love that walkway because it was so scenic. Oh my god.
Because when you think of the park as just having like the escalators and the Skyride Plaza and the Dragon Plaza, like that all kind of makes sense in its own way. But then by like opening up the service road to make it a midway, to make it like, to make other areas, to make like the mine train area feel easier to access, they kind of just made the park too big. And when you're walking on that midway, it doesn't really feel like you're in the park. It feels like you're, like there's no retail, there's no shopping. Like it was a weird, that backside of the park and the lack of infrastructure related to anything other than just like those 3 rides became like kind of weird. And then before you know it, you just have too big of a park with not enough people going.
Yeah.
So now they need to shrink the park so that the parts of the park were, you know, that are open are actually running, you know, firing on all cylinders. And then, you know, you don't have a park that's bigger than what your capacity calls for. So, I don't know. I wish that part, the world, I really want, even though Dragon is closed, and I'm very sad about that, I really hope that the park, you know, has a good future. I would hate for the park to close, but I think that's always been a worry.
But I think the good news is that I think that the government is, you know, Ocean Park's kind of an institution. I don't expect it to go anywhere. I just wish it was nicer right now, but it's okay. Like Alex said, I mean,
now that the water park is
the water park and the hotel are good moves.
With the water park project complete and the hotel project complete, I hope that like there's really nothing left to do but really focus on the park.
Yeah, so fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed.
And that was just one of our many layovers. We also had a layover together in Madrid, which we'll be doing an episode about, along with our little Disneyland Paris visit we just did. And we're also going, fingers crossed, if everything works out properly, we're going to Efteling and Winter Wonderland later this month. So there's still a lot going on, and we'll have podcasts about that. And we also have yet to talk about our Tokyo parks, and that will also come your way. So we thank you for staying with us, checking out our previous episodes, staying tuned for our future episodes. And of course, follow us on social media. We're the Coaster Kings on Instagram, Facebook. We're technically still on Twitter, but
we're on Blue Sky
now. TikTok, all the above. TheCoasterKings.com, and we'll catch you guys on next week's episode.
Bye.